afternoon. So let's try it again. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So I'll let you know that what I did on Tuesday with the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade teachers, they were very honest with me. And they said, oh my gosh, we're not ready for this at our teams. And I said, okay. So I revamped what I did with them. Even though it was a different content area, I revamped it so that today, here's the plan. We're going to do two things. The first outcome is to learn what questions to ask in a PLC meeting to unpack essential learning standards. So if you're having a planning meeting with your team, I'm saying if, because we know that not all teams are there yet. And that was very obvious to me with my last group. Not all teams are at that place. It requires a lot of work, a lot of support from our administration, as well as just the background knowledge of knowing how to facilitate meetings where you're actually making agreements and reaching consensus, which we all know from our training with Mark Kalanico that we're all at different places. But I'm going to put that aside. And I'm going to put it aside because I really believe that the work that we need to do is moving the learning forward to benefit our students. And today we're going to look at a way to work with strategies and really have a conversation that you should be able to take exactly what we do here today, take it back to a PLC tomorrow, and do the exact same thing with your 3rd or your 4th grade team. That was my intent, and the 5th grade team, they loved it because they're going, okay, we're taking the mathematics a little bit deeper, but I'm building the scaffolding in where I'm giving you all the answers afterwards so that you have the answers. And I'll tell you and be very transparent with you, a couple days ago, when I was looking through all that we've been doing across the district with number talks, all of a sudden I'm reading Tim Canel's new book and he goes, every one of those number talks has a property associated with it. Now think about that, the distributive, the commutative, and the associative property. Every single one of those properties can be represented in a number talk on how kids decompose or deconstruct a problem. And I went, oh my gosh. So that's what we're going to be doing this afternoon, is we're going to walk through that with your team. And then what's amazing to me is then you have this mindset when you have your students do number talks, you can do what Rick did with you guys when he threw in numerator and denominator. He just did it nonchalant, didn't he? It was like, as a matter of fact. And then he just started using that language of instruction, that academic language, instead of it being something that, oh, here's our words for today, and we're going to learn these things. No, it's very authentic learning, and it's meaningful. So that's what I hope that we can do. The second one is practice using a discussion tool that addresses strategies to multiply. We're going to do, of 6 or 7 different things Tim Canel calls out with planning a lesson, we're going to just do one. I tried to do it all with 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and they thought I was kind of wacky. So I learned. So we're going to do that. But here's what I want you to do first of all. So one of the things that we want to make sure we call out at every single meeting is, as leaders of learning, and that whole notion of coming together for that collective inquiry, what are we going to do with kids? Where do we want them to go? There's 3 things that we want you to be mindful of. The first one is asking the right questions. Because we can ask questions that make people feel defensive, or we can ask questions that are undermining the learning, or we can ask questions that lead our colleagues, just like we're asking you to do in your classrooms. How do you nudge the learning without leading it? How do you ask the right questions to get people to think about what you want them to think about? And the next is, how do you facilitate the dialogue? And so when you're in your group today and we start doing some of the work, each one of you be a participant, but also be mindful of how many people are participating, who has the loudest voice, how are you being heard, what are the types of things people are saying, how do you affirm what somebody's saying and make them feel validated. So all of those things we're going to try to look for, listen for, and just practice. And then the final one is help build shared knowledge. I hope that when we leave here today that you have a greater sense of, when you do number talks, how you can start attaching to that the academic language of the properties that are part of math. Okay? So what I'd like you to do right now is, at your table groups, I want you to read this quote, and then I want you to think about what's most important that jumps out to your team at your table from here about professional learning communities. Okay? Go ahead and read and then have that conversation. If someone said something at your table that you would like to share out, that you feel is one of those nuggets that are embedded in this quote, please do so. Raise your hand or just shout it out. Don't be shy because I know your names. Cheryl, give us one.
Oh, darn it. One of the things that we talked about was clarifying exactly what students are to learn. All too often we try to just say what's the standard or what's the skill versus what is it we actually want them to learn from these particular problems they're asked to do.
Okay. Barbara.
Can I, and kind of along that same line as a lot of teachers they feel like, you know, you have Go Math as your tool, you have to do every lesson in the book, and you have to get to the end, by the end of the school year, when really some of those might not really address the standards that we need to teach, and some things that we need to address are not dealt with enough in the program, so you have to spend more time. So getting, you know, unmarrying yourself from this is what I have to do, and, you know, be able to, this is what we need to do, and we can get rid of this and we can add this in place of that.
And that's why we thought it was very timely to talk about the framework today, so that you can really focus on those critical standards that are really important, those critical clusters that are on that continuum of learning to 8th grade, where they are then going to have that depth and breadth for algebra. And so we really want to make sure that what you're doing in Go Math is aligned with the framework, aligned with the standards, and so you're really focusing on what's most important. Because we know that it takes a long time, and so you have to make choices so that you're looking for and delivering the instruction that's most aligned with what kids need to know for that continuum down the road. Anybody else want to add something else that's in there? Yes, thank you. Kathy.
The other one I noticed we didn't actually get to because we were talking about that one, but was that each student's in a timely basis. So I know that I struggle with that. I have some students that will finally get it after we've tested, so I'll usually let them go retest. Mm-hmm. But that each student, it's hard to get each student.
Mm-hmm. But if we're mindful of that we know that's important, and we become really good practitioners with formative assessment, that minute by minute of progress monitoring in our classroom, where we're monitoring what they're doing, we're minding the room, we're paying attention, and we're redirecting and revisiting, and we're teaching at times just that little praise prompt and leave that kids need. That's what Dylan Willems talks about when he says embedded formative assessment is minute by minute in your classroom during instructional time. And that unless we get out in the classroom and mind the room and watch what they're doing, or we have them share out and we are checking for understanding throughout our lesson, and we get them to explain how they know something, we're going to miss oftentimes those children that we need to re-engage them in the learning, and they might need that targeted instruction. And one of the things that we can do is when we look at exactly what students need to know, if you're not familiar with Visible Learning, John Hattie's book that's out, is that he really talks about how important it is for students to know exactly where they are on the continuum of learning, but also what's the success criteria? What does proficiency look like? How do they know where they are? And do they know what they need next? Are you the keeper of all the information and all the grades and everything that they do, or do they know? And so one of the things that we want to think about is, do kids know what they know and what they need to do next? And when we call out and clarify exactly what it is that they need to do, because we've broken down and deconstructed the standard, and we've chosen that one piece, because remember, standards have multiple objectives embedded in them. And so we have to identify what it is that's most important to isolate, to look at for mastery, because those are prerequisite skills to something else. Okay? So let's read this one together because you know it by heart. You probably could tell me those questions out. Ready, go.
Professional learning communities ask, what do we want our students to learn, and how will they know when they have learned it?
Those two questions are planning questions. That's why the next activity we're going to do is about the planning and thinking about what is it you want students to know. Can you look at a standard and agree to what it is you want students to know, and then what are you going to use to measure it to determine if they have proficiency. How many of you have been on a committee or at your school site have identified exemplars for writing? If you've done writing across your campus and you've pulled exemplars out and you go, this is a 4, this is a 3, this is a 2, and this is a, were they in class? You know, I mean, these continuums, right? See, you are listening. I'm testing. So the idea is that why don't we do the same thing in mathematics? Why aren't we thinking about what does a proficient student look like, and then we have exemplars so students know. And when they don't know and it's not clear to them, we need to make it clear to them. And so we really want to look at, and this is those of you that are at schools with EDI, that whole notion of explicit direct instruction is that what do you do first is here's your objective. Does it match your assessment? Are they in alignment? Because if you don't have the assessment you're going to use for your instruction aligned to the objective that you're teaching, then students can't follow that narrative path or those instructional strategies that you're using and that continuum of learning to know where to go and how to get there. So it's really important that we're very mindful of these different pieces as we're studying. So Julie has some packets. Do not peek at this packet. Please do not peek, because I really want you to stay with me, because the learning is very critical today, and it's absolutely a perfect opportunity for you to see how people on your team might feel and how students might feel, but collectively you can figure it out and you can do it. Okay, so let's look at this. So here's what Tim Canel put up with. He puts up with a lot. Discussion tool for making sense. So I want to show you, as a collaborative team, when you're planning a lesson, how many of you think about unpacking the essential standard or the standard that you're going to teach? That you break it down and actually go, okay, there's more than one thing in this lesson. How many of you actually think about that or even have done that at a team yet? Okay, a few of you. So here's the thing I want to draw your attention to that I just did at a site, and it was so powerful. Is anyone in here from West? Okay.
It was awesome.
It was awesome. And I have to say so myself, because here's what we did. We took Achieve the Core, has an instructional planning tool. That instructional planning tool is to get your thinking, and we had it up here earlier. I'll write it up here. Maybe wherever Julie is, she can write it up. But Achieve the Core has an instructional planning tool with a series of questions for you to think about when you're planning your lesson. And so I'm just going to tell you, I did that, and it kicked my booty, because I thought, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about these things. Yes?
What is Achieve the Core?
Achieve the Core is a conglomerate of educational experts and teachers that have taken lessons and they've designed them to make them Common Core-ified, if that's a word. And what they've done is they've created model exemplary lessons that are Common Core aligned, and then they've developed a template to be able to think through all of these questions to ask yourself about a lesson. And so one of the lessons that I went through a 4th grade Go Math lesson, 5.2, and I'm just going to go through this whole thing on this site. One of the questions, I'm going to tell you 3 questions that I was asked when I got to this point. What's the academic language that you need to know for this lesson? And I was doing factors, multiples, and divisibility. Those were the 3 academic words that were part of the lesson. So I wrote those in. I go, okay. I used the marginalia in Go Math. Everything I did for this on this template was from Go Math in the marginalia of a teacher's manual. The next question was, what's the informal language that your students will bring to this lesson? What do you think they'll bring to a lesson when you're dealing with multiples, factors, and divisibility?
Count bys.
Count bys, what else?
Skip count.
Skip count. I would have loved to have a group of 4 times. I wrote goes into, right? Would they say goes into? Okay, so here's the next question. I thought, okay, I know the academic language, I know what the kids are going to bring to the lesson. The next question that I had to answer, what are you going to do to take them from the informal language to the precise language of the academics? Right? Think about that. What do we do to bridge that gap? And it went on and on about these questions about what prerequisites do you think they're going to bring to this lesson? What's the rigor that you're going to add to the lesson to make sure that the complexity of the task is at the level of Common Core. So all of these questions, I'm going, my goodness, this is crazy. So then I get Tim Canel's new book, and he focuses on, instead of 7 pages, which we did, these are the things that we want to address. So let's look at the first one, unpacking the essential learning standard, breaking it down, deconstructing it. Look at the second one, identifying prerequisite skills. If you're mindful, when you're planning with your team or even yourself, if you're mindful of what the prerequisite skills are, do you think if you've thought about it, then when you start seeing kids grappling and struggling that you're going to go? And guess what else Go Math will provide for you? Because the question on Achieve the Core said, what are the common errors you think kids are going to make? It asked the question, and I go, oh, let me look. Oh, it says here's a common error, that they might think that, 19 is a number that has a factor. Why? Because they look at the 9, right? 3 goes into 9, so 9 goes into 9, 1 goes into 9, but they didn't think about 19 as the whole number. And so you think about those, and then you can spot when they make that error. Here's the next piece. What question can I ask to nudge the learning without leading them down that path and making them feel like you're bailing them out and they don't have to grapple and think? Okay, the next one, pacing the chapter. When you come together to plan a lesson, how much time does the chapter or the lesson does it take to adequately prepare kids to be proficient if this is one of those clusters that are critical in the framework? We have to be mindful of at what point are they so critical that we have to invest the time to make sure kids are proficient. The next one, the vocabulary I've already talked about, identifying specific strategies. What are the strategies the kids will bring to the lesson or that you might expose them to? How many of you are doing number talks on a regular basis? If you're not, I would encourage you to do number talks for 10 minutes, warming them up and letting them see the strategies. The next one is, this is probably the hardest, is as you're designing the lessons or you're looking at the lesson planning, what are the SMPs to include? Because the SMPs are the standards for the students, and that is what is going to engage them in the process of understanding the content. If you don't attach SMPs to your lesson planning, the chances are you're not going to see student engagement to the degree that we know we need to have students engaged to take the mathematics deeper. But when you're planning and you're thinking about it, okay, for sure, one, we want to make sense of it. Do we want them to be able to critique the reasoning of others? Yes. Do we want them to be able to use tools appropriately? Yes. Do we want them to use structure in this kind of a problem? Yes. So if you're thinking about it, then you go, okay, when I plan, I want to make sure I include those in my planning. So here's what we're going to do, and you cannot peek. All right. So we're going to do the how of just one of his call-outs, which is strategies. So how can your team explore the general unpacking of content and look at student mathematical practices? So if we look at this one right here, understand properties of multiplication and the relationship between multiplication and division. 3rd grade operation and algebraic, okay? So that's it. But there's 2 standards embedded in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to, for the purpose of our discussion, we're going to focus on understanding how to apply strategies based on the properties, the 3 properties of operation to multiply. So that's what we're going to do collectively. So here's the question. How would we expect students to demonstrate their understanding of both the standard of using properties correctly and mathematical practices? So on the first page right here, these are the questions that you would ask as you're planning, but we're not doing all of them. So turn it over, but don't peek. And we're going to use just this page right here. And there's 3 questions. So let's look up here at this prompt. Share your property-based strategies to find 6 times 7 with your table group and discuss which properties you use to find the product. So here's kind of the directions. The very first thing you're going to talk about is, what does it mean to apply strategies based on properties? So we know the properties are, tell them with me, the commutative, associative, distributive. So in number talks, when kids go to solve 6 times 7, if you go in your head, well, I know how I would solve it. I would do this and this. I don't want to give it away because I want you to have the time. What property are they using to do that? And if you don't know, that's okay, because I'm giving you the answer sheet. at the end. But I want you to engage in the conversation. I want you to think about the properties. And then the second question is, how might students engage in the process of applying the strategies to multiply? All the ways that you would expect kids to show on number talks, put those down there. And then the last one is, which mathematical practices would you highlight during a unit that's focused on the mathematical, focused on highlighting this, applying the strategies based on properties of operation to multiply? So there's 3 parts. So the first is, what does it mean to apply those 3 properties? And then what do you expect kids to do? And then we're going to share out what you would expect to see. If Barbara Roth was up here doing number talks and Kim's going to give her how she solved that problem, what would she do? How would she do it? And then the key is going to be, how are you going to insert that academic vocabulary of the different properties as you're going, oh, so Kim decided to use the distributive property in this problem. Okay, and then somebody else. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you see the conversation? So talk at your table groups and think of all of the ways kids would do 6 times 7 and think about what property it is they're using. Okay? Go. Raise your hand if you have at least 5 ways that students would bring their learning to this problem. You have at least 5 ways. So let's have your attention back up here. Before we start talking about how you think students would approach 6 times 7 as if it were a number talks, what are some of the things that you discussed as a table group that you can see those same discussions happening within your PLC, and how would you facilitate that conversation? So, first point, what are some of the things that you talked about that you would expect to have the same conversation in your PLC? Yes, Pat.
Maybe just clarifying properties, like,
Okay.
okay, so you're breaking apart, so does that mean distributive, or were you, changing the order, or were you, sharing groups or something, and maybe goes, oh, that's distributive, well, no, that's probably commutative, or, so maybe we'd have to kind of discuss what, how you're gonna look at how they're different properties.
And is that a perfect place to have that happen?
Yes.
Yes, that's the purpose of a PLC, is to be able to take the learning deeper, but be able to have clarification, to be able to hone your own skills. Okay, yes?
We had a discussion about the 3 properties and that the difference between a property and a strategy. There's lots of strategies that the kids would use to get to 6 times 7, but there's not necessarily a property name attached to it. Not every strategy falls under one of those properties, so there's a difference between using the property and using a different strategy.
Beautiful, and that's what this table right here was having the conversation about, because how could you come up with 7 under the properties?
Right.
Okay, good. Anything else? Is this taking mathematics deeper? Yes, it is. And is that what we want to do? Okay? And make it safe. Okay, anybody else? So whether it's a strategy independent of a property or a strategy with a property, we'll start with this table and tell us, what do you think kids will do to be able to solve for the 6 times 7 to get the product? What would they do? Give us one.
An array.
Okay, this table, Cheryl's table.
Repeated addition.
Okay, so make sure you speak up all the way. I'm going to pull Fran. I'm going to go on the other side of the room so that I don't have to revoice what you're saying. So say it nice and loud.
Repeated addition.
Okay, back table.
Distributive property.
Okay, and what did you distribute?
I could see students doing doubles of 3 times 7 plus 3 times 7.
Okay, did everyone have that one? Okay, the next table, what would you do? Anything
You were
different?
saying having a double? She just said that.
She kind of said having
Number line.
Okay. Barb's table?
6 times 6 plus 6.
Oh, how many of you had that one? Okay, 6 times 6 plus 6 more to get your 7th 7. Okay, back table over here. Candy's table? Or Lisa's table?
Count bys.
Count bys? Okay. This table?
We did the 7 times 5 plus 7, or yeah, 7 times 5 plus 7.
Okay, 7 times 5 plus 7. Okay. This table over here? Miriam's table? Is there anything different?
No, not really. Draw a model.
Okay. Draw a model. This table, anything different? All the same? Okay, this table here? Okay. Making groups? Okay. So one of the things that is really important, and I want to have you look up here, is that identifying specific strategies that kids would naturally share out during number talks, and then using the language that's academic and just sharing with them the property they're using when they choose a strategy that fits under one of the properties. It's just starting to embed the language of instruction, and it's starting to make known to them what it is that you're talking about when they distribute or they use commutative or associative property. So you want to start using that language of instruction, and the number talks is a perfect opportunity to do that. But here's what we know. The mathematics that you know will drive that home with them. And so in your PLC, when you're talking about vocabulary, and you're talking about the importance of embedding vocabulary into the lesson in an authentic way, this is a perfect example of you have to know the difference between a property and a strategy, and you have to know how the different properties fit in with the different strategies and which ones fall into those categories. So I want you to, now we're going to do something different. On your packet now, one of the things that Tim Canel calls out is how important it is to plan and look at all of these different components to planning a lesson. So what I gave you is for multiplication, you have all of those questions that he started with about the vocabulary, about breaking down the standard. All of those are on this sheet that I gave you attached to the second page of your packet. It's a sample unit plan, a progression of content of applying strategies of operation. But I want you to notice how many mathematical practices did they call out for this standard? There's 4 different ones. Look at the language of instruction. What's the academic language at the bottom that you would want to make sure that you build into the lesson? Okay? So this is all of the different components, but what I would like you to do, based on what you see up here, I'm going to give you the sheet. You want to help me with that? Will you pass those out this side of the room? This is the 2-page sheet that really shows you how to use the properties with multiplication, and he gives you kind of the rundown of how to take and teach that and apply it to the properties. So I'm going to go ahead and pass that out. There's some really great conversations, and I would like to ask, if you were to do this lesson, if you were to ask your teachers to do the 3 questions that you did, what are the things that you would want to have in place to make it safe? So what are the things, because we know that not everything's created equal, not everybody comes with the same skill set. So how would we make it in a PLC safe to do the deeper mathematics?
Compliment someone when they bring something new to the table. So like, if you just, oh my gosh, I never thought of it that way, thanks. And then you write it down, then other people at the table feel like, oh good, because I didn't know that either. And so then they feel like it's a safe place to be.
Okay. Anybody else? Kim?
I think it's sharing one of my own failures, what didn't work.
Okay.
And I could use their help and ideas in figuring out how to make it work next time. What do I need to change? What do I need to do?
Okay. Anybody else? Because how do we make it safe to go deeper into the mathematics? Because to do this type of work, and remember, this is for your team to prepare for the instruction. This is to prepare for the instruction, to understand the properties, to understand strategies kids would bring to the lesson, to really get a look at and have an understanding of the vocabulary. This is all part of the planning so that you can then lead these conversations with your students and feel competent. If they ask a question, why is that this property and not that one? You have that background knowledge and you know it because you've had an opportunity to talk about it with your team. Yes?
Well, just kind of on what was been said, but being specific about today and letting them know. I mean, they already call me the math guru, and I'm still sitting here with the associative and commutative trying to work it out. So let them know I struggled here too. When we talked about this, I struggled, and so I think that we should go over this.
Well,
kind of pull that in.
when I saw this in Tim Canel's book, and then I saw how he describes each of the properties with each of the models that kids would bring, I thought, okay, everyone needs that. Because if you go to your PLC and you want to be able to lead this conversation, you want to know and have the background knowledge to be able to facilitate that conversation. And not that you have to go knowing everything, it's just that you want to be able to show what you had to do to make it safe. I didn't know this. I didn't know it off the top of my head. I had to read it, I had to learn it, and I had to talk about it. And you go back and say, today at our PLC, or yesterday at our PLC, I had to do the same thing. But the idea is how do we move the learning deeper into mathematics so that we feel more comfortable letting kids do the mental math with number talks, or to let go of the control so we let them have those conversations and we mine the room for those ideas. We have to feel comfortable with the math. But we want to take that into our PLCs and build our PLCs so that they feel comfortable. What else would you do? Cheryl?
Have the resources necessary. Like our group, we were like, oh, holy cow, what were the standards of mathematical practice again? Somebody pull out the sheet so we can see it, and I can see a lot of the people at the PLC expecting us to simply have it memorized, and that's not supposed to be the case. Rather, like really having a good conversation. Okay, here they are, let's look at them, and so there's that equal footing.
Right. And it's okay to say, I don't know all 8 of them, but I have the placemat for implementation. I don't know which one I need to attach to this lesson and this objective, but let's talk about it and see. If we're working with algebra tiles, well then we would want to include the standards for mathematical practice about what? Using tools appropriately. It makes sense. But almost every single task, performance task you want kids to do, especially all of our word problems, they all need to be able to make sense of it, right? And if somebody disagrees, I should be able to know what's the protocol for disagreeing with Judy. I should be able to know what sentence frame can I use to say, well, I disagree with you because, what is it we're doing with our speaking language standards to embed them into our mathematics instruction so that we can have those kinds of oral discourses in the classroom that are also tied to our SMPs. Okay? Anything else you would do yes?
No, I have more of a management question.
Okay.
Since we're a year-round school,
Yes.
we're all at different places. So it's like, how do I schedule, how do I handle, oh, well, we're way back here, but you're way up here, and
What I would suggest, and this would be, I think, a safe place a way to go, and it would be also a very powerful learning, is that all of you cover the same chapters. So whether it's going forward with a chapter or one you've already covered, I would take one of those performance tasks that you want kids to be able to do. And as a team, I would say, let's deconstruct this task. What do they have to know? What's this asking? How many parts are there to it? What standards for mathematical practice have we already taught that lend itself for them being able to do this? And so I would go with something that's common assessment or common in terms of what they would use. If you guys use Form A, then use something from Form B at your PLC to have a conversation about, to maybe start doing some planning of how you would use it as your morning work, or opportunities to have board math, or opportunities to do number talks. I would use something that everybody's going to have and be familiar with. But I think that's the safest way, because if you're trying to plan a lesson for everybody to teach, that's very difficult because of your round schedule. But all of you will go through the chapter 2, and all of you could choose a performance task, do it, and then come back. And at one of our optional meetings, we're going to talk about how do you look at student work from a performance task, and to what rubric, and to what is proficiency. What does it look like? And we're going to have those conversations as we move along in this year. We're trying to truncate everything so that it's not overwhelming, so that you can take something back from here right back to a PLC. Yes, Lisa?
I think that when you first asked us to come up with the ways a kid would pose or solve this problem, it was a little panicky because I didn't quite understand what you meant. So if I was initially having this discussion with my PLC, I would probably give them what the kids came up with and then reflect back, because teachers are kind of trained to backwards map and reflect back. So to lower the panic, just give them what a kid came up with and say, okay, how would you connect that to a property? How would you connect that to a strategy? And then once they've done that once or twice, then come at it from the other angle.
And see, you know your teams and you know what the best strategy is to be able to take the mathematics deeper. And what was interesting in the other room when we did this, somebody gave 5 times 7 and then add one more 7, and no one else thought about this. So the whole room went, oh. And it was like, then they laughed because the reaction was, that's what kids do. Oh, I didn't think about that. And so those opportunities where teachers can go, oh, I didn't think about that, those are those learning moments that we want to be able to provide. Anything else in terms of your role as a PLC leader to be able to make it safe? I mean, these are great ideas. Yes?
I just wanted to say, last year when you gave us the digging up dinosaur math problems, I know our team, when I took that back to my site, that was very safe for us because it was outside of Go Math, but it was something that we could all do at the same time, being on a year-round schedule. And something like that, if you have more of those, I would love them because my team ate them up.
Yeah.
Like, they were all over.
If you go to Inside Mathematics, when you go there across the top, at the very top, it has a tab that says Tools for Teachers. And you click on that tab that says Tools for Teachers. It's Inside Mathematics. It used to be, Inside Mathematics. Inside. So then at the top, there's a tab that says Tools for Teachers. And then once you do that, down the left-hand side, it will be all the domains. You click on any one of those domains, and it's going to launch for you all of the problems of the month. Now, if you want to just Google problems of the month, it'll take you there also. But there's also different people that put problems of the month out there. But this site has them by grade level, has them by domains, and it also has them with all of the standards, all of the answers, everything that you would think of. It's all completely there for you. And it has the ditto page ready to give to students. But the other thing that's on there are the Mars tasks. And so those are also embedded on the site. And they'll say Mars tasks, which are they're cognitively guided instruction tasks that are more rigorous. But those, we love those problems of the month. I do. I love teaching those. I love doing those with kids because those are the kind of problems that your high kids, they want to try to figure out the algorithm for them. And they want to just try to solve it. And usually you have to do something very different than just multiplying the numbers to get the answer. And I'll give you an example. There are 54 wheels. We did this one with the principals, I think, last year. There's 54 wheels and there's 21 seats. How many bicycles and how many go-karts? I had students that were the top students in a 6th grade class that did a ratio table of 1 to 4, 1 to 2, and they went all the way across. They did it all, and they go, it can't be solved. Top 2 twins, top 2 in the class, can't do it. And I said, are you sure? They go, yep, can't be done. I said, well, do you think maybe you need to go back and read the problem and check the criteria of the problem to your work? Because I tried to not say, well, you can be, and I tried to point out, no. Here's what she did and why she couldn't figure it out. She assumed that there was going to be 10 go-karts and 10 bicycles. So she made a ratio chart of 10 and 10. Well, if she would have added 10 and 10 for her seats, there were 21 seats. So she couldn't even see her error of seats. But here's what happened in that class. A student started drawing the 54 seats, or the 54 wheels. We had them come up with starts and show it. Well, tell us about your work. Well, I'm going to draw all of the wheels, and then I'm going to circle 2s and 4s. Perfect. Went back to the seat. Another kid raised his hand. I didn't want to draw 54 wheels, so I just did 21 seats, and I did triangles. Okay? And then I'm going to start adding the wheels and seats. This little girl, this is no lie, principal, the vice principal, 2 teachers are watching this lesson. They know the class, I don't. Little girl sitting on the side of the room, all of a sudden she watches him put his paper up there with the triangles, and she just goes, that start, within, no kidding, 1 minute and 30 seconds, she solved the problem. And so we had to go up and, well, what did you do? Well, I put 2 wheels on every single seat because either they're going to have, they all have 2 wheels at least. And then I looked at, well, there's 42 wheels I've used, and there's 54, or no, there's 42 wheels I've used. How many are left? There's 12 wheels left. So I figured out how many more I had to add 2 wheels to get to the go-karts. Lowest kid, learning center kid, all she needed was that starts of the triangles with the seats, and it's like, this is easy. The top kid in the class couldn't figure it out because it wasn't an algorithm. Then we had the same class, we had kid doing factor tables. They were factoring 5421 and they're doing all this work, and it's like, and then she stops. And so we go, well, what's the matter? This isn't going to work. Knowing the factors of these 2 numbers, it's not going to work. Oh, really? Well, why don't you go up and explain why? So see, what happens is when you do these kind of open-ended problems, you get to the mathematics, but you also get to see what kids think and what they do. That's what we want kids to be able to grapple with, is what do I have to do? What do I have to think about to be able to solve problems? And so in your PLCs, that's a great suggestion, by the way. In your PLCs, make it safe. Talk about the problems ahead of time, whether it's a performance task or a problem of the month. And then when you bring back the student work and you start analyzing, that's where you can start looking and focus on student work, not teacher teaching, student work, and say, wow, what do these kids have control of and what do they know to be able to solve this kind of problem? That still keeps it very safe, right? And then at some point, what's going to happen is you're going to say, what did you do to get them to that point? Then we can start asking the questions of strategy. So our goal today was to give you something that you could take back to a PLC that you could do, and then the second page of that packet, it has everything already done with planning and really looking at a lesson from a standard of all the pieces. That could be a model, a template for you for any lesson that you would do. So your PLC work, I hope that it is continuing to move forward. If there's questions specifically, I know there's some people that have called me that I've come out and attended their PLC to facilitate, to help. It's hard when they're all on Mondays, but because there's one of me. But what we're really doing tomorrow is we're starting to work with our coaches to be able to provide that support and to be able to go forward and continue the work when we visit your schools. So thank you, and I hope you have a great evening.